Hi, I'm Adam,
This is Kevin.
and we are Tech Guys Who Invest. This is the place for business people and investors to learn all about investing. We offer a fresh perspective on what it's like to have a day job while investing, and we share lessons learned on our investing journey. Our vision is to educate and entertain you while adding tons of value to your daily commute. Welcome to our show. This episode of Tech Guys Who Invest is brought to you by Dreamstone Investments. Dreamstone is a multifamily real estate operator based in Atlanta, Georgia, and Tampa, Florida. Dreamstone specializes in finding and acquiring off-market value-add deals across the southeastern part of the U.S. Dreamstone creates immense value by ensuring the tenants are treated like residents and by adding the Dreamstone touch to each of our communities. To schedule a call to find out more about their current offerings and to see how you can partner with them, please send an email to info@dreamstoneinvest.com. You can also check out their website at dreamstoneinvest.com. Hello, listeners. As 2020 winds down, we, the Tech Guys Who Invest, have been thinking about lessons we learned in this year because it was a crazy year for sure. And Kevin and I started talking about in these kinds of times, especially when things just seem out of the ordinary or a little crazy, it's important to try to learn something from that and use it to improve and make your life better. So we decided to do this episode, which we're calling 10 Lessons from 2020. So each of us will share 5 lessons with you guys. And Kevin, I'd like to ask you, what's one lesson you'd like to share with our listeners?
Yeah, so from an investing perspective, one of the lessons that I learned is I would say that just because a deal fell through doesn't mean you failed, right? And you can even look at baseball as a sport. I'm not a big baseball fan, but batting averages, right? How much I think a batting average is how often you have a successful hit versus how many you don't. And it's my understanding that if you have a 0.3 batting average, that's really good. So 3 out of the 10 times you swing and you get a successful hit, that is a great batting average. In investing, or even in life, right? There's a level of persistency. But just because something doesn't work out the way you want it to, doesn't mean you failed, and especially from an investing perspective. So what I mean by that, for me personally, there were a couple of deals this year that I was really looking forward to do. We got really close to closing, but then I double checked my due diligence, dotted my I's, crossed my T's, and it didn't make sense. It was something, maybe a nagging intuition. For one note that I called the county's tax just to double check. And it turns out that the borrower was behind on their taxes. So I looked at the note again, and it was the borrower's responsibility. When I reached out to the seller had no idea the borrower was behind 2 years on property taxes. And then that very next year, in 2021, that property would have been, the city was going to take it and sell it at a tax sale. So if I had bought that note and wasn't paying attention, I would have lost everything. And there was another deal that I was doing. It was a potential land deal that I was trying to structure. And in the process of learning what's possible, of how to structure this, to get in touch with the borrower ended up going seller financing with the seller of these lots of lands. But as I was creating these terms that I was comfortable with presenting, that my investors were comfortable with having, I was learning, okay, this is possible. This is how it could work. These are business ideas. These are things that we could do as the lender. Speaking to mentors, speaking to attorneys. The deal fell through, as I mentioned, because the borrower went a different route. But that whole process taught me just so much of how to be creative, what's possible, things you can do. And it ties into another lesson that I'll share later on. But Adam, what would be a lesson that you learned from 2020?
Well, first of all, Kevin, I appreciate that last lesson that you shared. I think that's really great. And I don't think podcasters or teachers or mentors in the real estate investing space share that kind of thing often enough. All too often, I feel like I'm hearing all these grandiose successes that people have that kind of make it feel like, how could I ever achieve that? And it's almost discouraging in a way when I know they mean it to be motivational. But I love what you said to kind of let people know, hey, look, it's not always rosy. So thanks for sharing that one. One for me, I think would be grateful for what you have and focus on that. Don't focus on what you don't have. I find myself doing that sometimes, and I have to kind of kick myself and say, wait a minute, man, don't focus on what you don't have, right? Focus on what you do and really be grateful for that. And if you stop and do that, it really puts you mentally in a much better place. I think that's super important when you're going through the type of thing we're going through as society due to the COVID pandemic right now, because I think it is super easy to be sort of negative or to find yourself not in a good place. So anything you can do to kind of help you stay in a little bit better place is a good thing. And this certainly helps me do that. Whenever I find that I'm being grateful for things, even simple things like, I'm grateful for the birds I hear chirping in the morning, or I'm grateful for like a cool ocean breeze, or just, simple things. It's hard to be, down, or it's hard to be negative or anything like that when you're grateful. What's another one for you, Kevin?
I love that gratitude. Before I dive into mine, I have to agree with you 100%. That gratitude aspect is huge, and it's so easy nowadays to get caught up. I know you and I have talked about the documentary, The Social Dilemma, right? And in social media, and we're not going to dive into it, but we highly recommend you watch it because it's quite eye-opening. In a very interesting way. I just want to leave it scary, but also quite interesting. But on social media aspect, it's so easy to get caught up and see what somebody else is doing, see what somebody, what they have, and think to yourself, man, why don't I have that, or anything like that. But just because you don't have it doesn't mean that that's really what you need or exactly what you want. Sometimes we think we want things that other people have, and it may not even really serve the same level of happiness that you would expect it to have. But of course, I know that it's hard to judge that when you don't have the thing that you think you really want. So being grateful for even the smallest things are so helpful. Like right now, the weather in Florida, finally, there's like a break from the humidity, and it feels wonderful. Like we get a lot of sun. It gets really hot, but it's really nice to be able to sit outside and just not feel like you're melting. And being grateful we have jobs, right? That Absolutely. Is a huge thing that I am extremely grateful for. And the health of all of my friends and family, that is really something to be said.
Awesome.
And I would say, and speaking of comparisons, when it comes to the second lesson, it's just because other people are overpaying for stuff doesn't mean that you should be doing that too. I'm seeing, for example, in the note space, I go on to things like PaperStack or notesdirect.com, and some of the performing notes are selling at 90 plus UPB, unpaid principal balance. So whatever's left on the note, people are paying, 90%. And to me, that it doesn't make sense. Or I just can't wrap my head around the way people are doing things, but that's okay. And if I'm the seller of something like that, you price it at where you can get the most money out of it. So I understand that there's room for negotiation, but also what I'm saying is you don't have to buy those things that are out there because it seems like everybody else is. You don't know their true numbers. You don't know how they're looking at this particular note. You may be able to ask, but you're not always going to get the right answer or the true answer. It really boils down to you, your investor identity, what you're comfortable with. If you're working with a partner, what they're comfortable with, doing the numbers and making sure the numbers are what they are. Don't try to massage or manipulate the numbers to fit, justifying saying, well, we could make this work. Because then you start getting into subjectivity with your investing, and that can get into some hot waters where you're kind of decreasing your margin or increasing your margin of error, decreasing the potential profits you can make. So because others are doing it doesn't mean you necessarily have to also. Go back to the math and let the math tell you what to do.
Love that advice.
So how about you, Adam? What's number two?
Okay. I would say there's opportunity in every situation, and how you look at your situation will determine your success, particularly with the pandemic situation. It's a tough situation. Successful people look for opportunities in difficult situations. Successful people ask themselves, how can I grow from this? What can I learn from this? Even when it's not comfortable or it's not fun or it feels bad, it's important to keep that mental attitude of what can I make from this? What opportunity can I find here? May not be easy, but that's the attitude, and that's what you're looking for. Everyone else, meaning people who are not successful people, think, oh gosh, how could this happen to me? Or what terrible luck I have, or man, nothing ever goes right for me. That is a horrible attitude and only makes things worse. So, no matter how bad it seems, and look, this pandemic has been an absolutely terrible thing that everyone on the planet has had to deal with. But it's important to kind of look for what opportunities are available in that and how can you benefit from that. How
I
about you,
love that.
Kevin? What's another one, man?
Speaking of that perspective on things, it's funny that our lessons are kind of playing off of each other. This was completely unintentional, by the way. Don't assume the other party's needs or wants or whatever the situation is. Of course, is that saying that if you assume, you make an ass out of you and me. And I remember that from, I don't know, the first time I heard it, I was in Catholic elementary school or middle school or something. So it's quite a controversial saying in the setting of Catholic school. But it stuck with me because it makes a lot of sense. But you don't really understand it until you get into a situation where you assume and it either bites you in the butt or it's just you learned from it. And what I mean by not assuming is whether you're raising capital, you're looking to solve a problem, you'll go into the situation trying to anticipate things, which is absolutely fair, right? That's normal. You want to be ready for certain questions, certain objections, things like that. But what I find is when you kind of prepare too much or lean too strongly on those questions or those assumptions, you're going to miss out on certain perspectives. You're going to miss out on the picture that matters most to that other person. There are investors out there who are happy with, a 4 to 6% on their money. And you may be asking, well, why would they be like that? It doesn't matter, because if that's what they're really happy about, that's what it should be. And asking them maybe why, or why somebody's looking to sell. Why does this note seem worthy of buying it? One thing that I've been doing is flipping the script and saying, if you were in my shoes, why would you buy this note? It's almost like saying, sell me on this deal, right? You almost feel like you're at Shark Tank, but it's a different way of getting a different perspective, getting rid of those assumptions and keeping an open mind, because we can almost be like too prepared, if that makes sense. One way I like to liken it is, if you're looking to have a conversation with somebody and you have a script of questions, you're not really listening at that point. You're listening to kind of figure out, okay, what's the next question I can ask? How can I fit this in here? And you'll miss out on the specific details, the particulars of an opportunity or of that particular person.
Yeah, that's good. I really like that. Okay, so for my next one, we are social creatures and depend on in-person interaction to remain healthy. I really learned that lesson this year, because not being physically around other people, being able to interact with them in person has been very tough. And I've noticed it affects everyone. It affects some people worse than others, I think, but it does affect all of us. And it just kind of, it messes with you sometimes, right? So that is just an interesting lesson that I learned there. And I'll try to find ways to kind of figure out how I can use that, or how I can ensure that understanding that helps me in the future. But I'm not sure if all of us, myself included, really understood deeply how necessary it is for us to have social interaction and be around other people. We, as the creatures we are, we really do need that to stay healthy. So just kind of a lesson I learned there. And I don't have anything more profound about that lesson. How about
I
you,
agree with
Kevin?
you. I miss being able to host our in-person cash flow games. Like, that was so much fun.
Yeah.
Or just being able to
Me
say, I'm
too.
going to go out to eat or something like that. I know that people are more, there's varying degrees of how liberal you are and comfortable you are during the pandemic. I am, I guess, similar to like an investor, my investor identity, I'm risk averse. The risk to me doesn't justify the reward. No offense to all my friends out there, but it's just how I feel. And if somebody's offended that I didn't see them, whatever, like that. But to your point, I agree. I miss it, and I'm really looking forward for the opportunity to just be around those that I loved hanging out with.
Yeah, me too.
I would say that the next lesson for me is lean on your relationships. And we talk about networking a lot, and we just had a recent guest that gave successful tips on successful meetups, or I can't remember the exact title, but the episode is tgwipodcast.com/Adam AAA Adams. Lots of A's there, but you get the idea. And relationships, your network, are huge. You're not really supposed to know everything. In fact, there's that old saying that if you are the smartest in the room, you're in the wrong room, and I 100% agree with that. Mm-hmm. It's almost like getting out of your own echo chamber, looking at different perspectives. But when I talk about leaning on your relationships, ask the professionals that are doing their job, the advisors that you have. You can take a look at the position of the president. The president isn't really supposed to know everything, right? That's why there are advisors. There are senior advisors, people that the president listens to then decide on making a best fit decision. The same holds true for yourself. If whether it's investing or problems in life, you're looking at or gathering advice, gathering information, and then making a decision. More specifically, in tying it back to investing, with COVID, there are, in certain cities, there are moratoriums for eviction, for foreclosure. How in the hell am I supposed to keep up with all of those in all the areas that I'm investing? That's where the experts come in. That's where the attorneys come in. Hey, what's going on here? If we had to foreclose, is that possible, or do we have to wait? Right? You can even set all the Google alerts you want, but it might be worth your time just to say, what's going on here? Can you help me understand this? Can we move forward with this strategy, et cetera? I love leaning on the knowledge of the experts within my network. So lean on your relationships, and this extends to personal things too, right? It's okay to ask for help if you need it. My friends have shown up for me this year more than I would have ever thought, and I'm greatly appreciative of that. And I try to reciprocate as much as I can. The relationships do matter, and when we can see each other, to Adam's point, it'll be much more exciting to see everybody again.
Yeah, I like what you're saying there a lot, especially the personal piece about leaning on those who care about you and allow them to be there for you. And if especially during these kind of hard times where we all need each other, and even if we can't be around each other physically, but we could still interact using technology like Zoom and other technologies, and just allow them to be there and support you. I think that's really good. Okay, so another one for me is many of our systems are more fragile than they seem. What I'm talking about there are the systems that we rely on every day for our survival, food supply, healthcare, economic and business systems, our education systems. They are more fragile than they seem because every one of those was impacted by this pandemic, and they were impacted pretty quickly. Remember when it first hit, it was pretty early on, and when you go to the grocery store, shelves were empty. And then people started freaking out and grabbing toilet paper and eggs and certain things, that meat, and you just couldn't find it, and it's like, oh my gosh, are you kidding me? And then, production wasn't able to keep up. And then in those meat processing plants where people started to get COVID and they're working in such close quarters, so it spread very quickly. And then they shut down. And then there was another meat shortage. And you're just thinking, wow, all these systems are kind of interrelated and can be fragile. Like something can easily knock out a piece of them, and then all of a sudden they kind of come down. There was always this bit of fear about the healthcare system, and if too many sick patients are needing to get into the hospital at once, there won't be the capacity to help them. Also, with the schools, they've done a pretty good job overall getting, like reacting and being able to step up to the situation. But at the same time, it the system can be fragile. You could see where something could cause it to come down. So I think maybe somewhere in the back of my mind, I had suspected it, but it was a lesson this year that was right in front of our face. And so I just thought that was profound.
Yeah, it's almost like you assume that the way things are going, that if it's not broken, don't fix it. But maybe there are reasons to look at a system in that particular light. Well, the worst case scenario. Just like if you were to invest, you want to think about the worst case scenario. How are you going to be protected in this downside? Otherwise, you might as well just go to the casino and play roulette or blackjack if you're comfortable with that type of risk not protecting your downside. That's a very interesting point. And I think that there is a lot of holes that we were able to see and a lot of ways that things needed to be improved for a variety of reasons. And I don't think we could have predicted the exact impact. I know there are people smarter than you and I, Adam, that have been saying, hey, there's something that you should kind of be aware of. Like Bill Gates, I know how to talk, and someone will probably correct me. I want to say 2015 or 2016, years before, COVID happened. And they were saying, hey, I don't know the exact premise, but I know he was advocating that something could happen and this could really hurt us in a variety of ways. Turns out he was not wrong.
Exactly. And it does make you think about other systems that may not have been impacted by this, but could be impacted by something. They're a little more fragile than they seem. The internet, could something out there potentially impact that in a rapid way, the way this did with some of the other systems I mentioned? Possibly. And how impactful would that be to us? So, it's just something kind of interesting to think about.
Yeah, I agree. And speaking of things to think about, for me, my last lesson is that priorities change. And what I mean by that is life is extremely dynamic, right? I don't find that there's really anything static about life as a whole in this journey that we're going on. Things vary by the day, et cetera. Situations come up. And 2020 has showed me that the priorities that I thought I had definitely had to shift, and ties into your first lesson of things to be grateful for. You just get thrown into situations where you kind of look at what really matters to you. And when you have to rise to a certain occasion, you will. I think that most people will. And if there's something that you struggle on, look to the lessons that we mentioned earlier. Reaching out to your network, you can reach out to us. We'd be happy to help you if we can. If we can't, well, try and guide and find a way to help you. But we're here. But what I was getting at is really that it's okay for those priorities to change, because it's what matters to you, what's important to you as an individual. Who cares what anybody else thinks your priorities should be? It really is what's important to you. The same thing is like walking a mile in your shoes. Nobody is really understanding what's going on. So if you feel that you're making the best fit decision of I need to put my time in this area, then you should be okay with that. So I'm not sure if that makes particular sense, but yeah, that's my last lesson that I've learned for 2020.
Yeah, excellent. And I feel like my last lesson is closely related to that. Mine is an unexpected event can rapidly impact people and societies across the globe. So an unexpected event can really change life for all of us on this planet. And, for me, the reason that kind of relates to the one you talked about is because you need to be able to change. You need to be able to deal with that. And if your priorities should change as a result of that, then you need to be able to change them and make that happen. So yeah, I feel like our last two might be closely related as well. So what I would take away from this one is be resilient, be able to make a change. Don't resist changes that you should make because it'll make you a better person. And that's kind of my last lesson.
Look, Adam, I thank you for sharing, first of all, the lessons that you learned. I had a good time sharing this with our listeners. And what I really enjoyed was sitting down and thinking, reflecting about the year. It's so easy to get caught up in, it's one of my favorite sayings that we've had is this has been the longest but shortest year. It feels like the lockdown, the pandemic starting in February was so long ago, but so much has happened at the same time. It's this weird, like Twilight Zone type of feeling. But when you really sit down and look at how your year's progressed, think about the ups and the downs. I think that's important to look at the entire picture. I have a tendency of looking of what I didn't do well enough or what I could have done more of, but then that overshadows the things that have gone well or the things you should be absolutely grateful for. And speaking, this is my own personal experience, but it's been really helpful to do this. And whether or not it's investing lessons or life lessons, write it down. I really recommend that you write it down. And we would love to hear from you if there's a specific lesson you learned, or if you agree or disagree with us. We'd be happy to converse about that. Send us an email, techguyswhoinvest@gmail.com.
Thanks, everybody. That's it for this episode of Tech Guys Who Invest. This is Adam.
This is Kevin. Thank you so much for listening to this week's episode. Be sure to subscribe to the podcast for the latest episode updates and to receive additional investor insights to help you invest wisely and safely. You can join the TGWI Insiders community at tgwipodcast.com/subscribe. Lastly, we would love to connect with you. The best way to reach us is by sending us an email at techguyswhoinvest@gmail.com. Thanks, everybody.